Since its release, the Creality Ender 5 Plus has gained a lot of popularity and is known for its large build volume and its ability to produce some fairly nice prints. 2 months ago, I showed you guys how to upgrade the Ender 5 Plus from its standard V-slot motion system to the ExoSlide motion system. And in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to add MicroSwiss's new ExoSlide specific direct drive and all metal hot end to that Ender 5 Plus. This will allow you to print with flexibles, abrasives, and other high temp materials that the stock hot end and extruder just will not work with. And although we're going to be installing it on the Creality Ender 5 Plus ExoSlide setup, this will be a very similar install to if you have another Creality machine with the ExoSlide. And even if you don't have a Creality machine, a few things will have to be tweaked, but a lot of the things in this video should still be applicable and hopefully they will help you out. Now, MicroSwiss did let me know that they are going to be releasing a PDF guide on how to install this, but I'm hoping this video will help provide you with a little bit more maybe clarity on some of the steps and give you a second point of reference to answer any questions and fill in any gaps that you might have. I'm pretty excited to get this installed because I've got some upcoming projects that can really benefit from having this hot end and extruder on there. So without further ado, let's get right into today's video. So once again, this is the MicroSwiss direct drive extruder and all metal hot end for the ExoSlide motion system. The first thing we're going to do here is open up the box and just go through everything that should be included with your kit. This is a great way to kind of gain familiarity with the parts and of course make sure that there's nothing missing from your kit. If you've already done this or gone through the checklist, then you can feel free to skip this, but this is a really good starting point. In the kit, you'll find your new heater block as well as the Thermistor Screw. The extruder lever, this will be for the new direct drive extruder. A bag of screws, which has also the beveled Capricorn liner and the retention clip for the Bowden or PTFE tube. The spring pin, spring tension knob, shoulder pin, and gear for the new extruder. Your hot ends heatsink and the heat brake. The silicone sock, which is awesome for making sure your new hot end stays nice and clean. The aluminum main extruder body that everything is going to be mounting to, and the 2 screws to mount that body to the ExoSlide motion system, the new nozzle, a various retention clips, Bowden clips, hot end screws, Grub screws, and the 2 tools that are included with this kit, the extension cable to move your stepper motor from where it's currently at to on the direct drive extruder, the printed bracket, which will be used to hold the filament tube or the PTFE guide tube, and some zip ties for cleaning up all of those cables and making sure they're nice and organized. You will also need some tools aside from what's included. You'll want an adjustable wrench, a Phillips head screwdriver, a 7mm socket wrench, a 2mm Allen wrench, and a 2.5mm Allen wrench. So it is worth noting that Creality at some point seems to be using these different stepper motors that basically have a completely round post, and the Extruder Gear, which isn't removable unless you use pretty serious brute force. So you can go through the trouble of removing these and then kind of filing down the post to create a flat spot, but what's easiest is to just order a replacement stepper motor if you have that kind of round stepper motor. So I ordered this over at Tiny Machines. I can link you guys in the description, but as you can see on the right, the stepper motor's post has a flat spot, which is what you're going to need for this install, and the one on the left is completely round. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of trying to remove that gear and filing down, I will link you guys again to that correct stepper motor. Alright, now that we've gone over the tools and the parts included with this kit, we are ready to install. Again, you will need to make sure that your printer already has the ExoSlide motion kit installed as a prerequisite. I can link you to the video I did on the Ender 5 Plus in the description of this. And once you've got that installed, you are ready to go. So first step is to remove the fan housing so that way we have access to the stock hot end. To do so, there's a screw on the top and there's another screw that is between the BL Touch and the left side of this fan housing. Whatever you do, be careful with these screws because you will be reinstalling this fan housing on the new aluminum hot end / extruder setup. So just make sure you put these off to the side somewhere that you're not going to lose them because you will be using them again. Once removed, you can just push the fan housing off to the side as well as the BL Touch, which will give you access to the stock hot end, which we're going to need to remove. To do so, just remove the 2 screws that are bolting it to the ExoSlide frame. The kit does come with new screws for the new hot end, so technically you don't need to hold on to these, but I still do just to have extra spares around. Now that the hot end's off, we are going to remove the silicone sock, which will give us access to the thermistor and the heater cartridge. We will be reusing both of these, so we do need to remove these from the stock hot end. To do so is pretty easy. The heater cartridge is held in by one screw on the bottom of the hot end. If you just turn that slightly, you should get enough wiggle room to be able to slide that thing back and forth, but don't pull that out until you've completely removed the screw holding the thermistor in, because the thermistor cables are very, very fragile and you want to pull these out in one motion. So if you just go ahead and unscrew that little Phillips screw, you'll have the ability to pull out the heater cartridge as well as the thermistor at the same time. And again, the most fragile part of this is that thermistor. Even if you've got oils on your hands, it can damage the thermistor, so just don't touch the end of that little bulb on the thermistor cable. Next, we're going to be removing the hot end, and to do so, you'll just go ahead and use your thumb to pull off the blue retention clip, and then use one of your hands to push down on the push fitting, and your other hand to pull the Bowden tube out of the hot end. And then as long as you've got the all-metal hot end variation and not just the extruder, you can actually go ahead and throw out this hot end because we will not be reusing it. And then we will turn our attention to the stock extruder, which we are now going to remove, so that way we have access to the stepper motor. To do so, we're going to need to remove at least 4 screws. There's 4 screws holding the stepper motor to the frame. I started off with the bottom right, which was the tension arm of the extruder. I just loosened that up, pulled that arm off, and then removed the spring as well. Then to get access to the top left screw, I had to actually remove the tension screw. It was kind of blocking it, so I just went ahead and unscrewed that as well. And then in no particular order, you can just go ahead and remove the other 3 screws. Word of warning, and I mentioned this in my last install as well, but this is the only thing holding the stepper motor to the frame, so when you get down to removing the last screw or 2, just use your other hand to hold the stepper motor so that way it doesn't fall off of the frame of the printer onto the ground, or I mentioned last time, hitting your big toe. So as you can see here, I've just got my hand in the back kind of cradling the stepper motor, so that way when this pops off, I can go ahead and set that down to the side. And then just like on the hot end, we are going to go ahead and remove the blue retention clip on the extruder and then push down on the press fit or the push release. And that'll allow us to pull that Bowden tube out, and we can just get rid of that old plastic extruder as well. And for now, just go ahead and unplug the stepper motor. Next up, we're going to need to remove the plate that we installed for the hot end onto the ExoSlide. To do that, we're just going to remove the 2 screws. There's one on the left and one on the right that holds this to the ExoSlide system. And we're going to be doing this so that way we can install the Micro Swiss aluminum body in its place. So once removed, grab that main extruder body as well as the 2 ExoSlide mounting screws that were included with the kit. And you're essentially just going to do an exact reverse of what you just did. So the same 2 screw holes that the original one was bolted into, we're going to go ahead and bolt this into. I went ahead and kind of loosely tightened both of them and then hand tightened each of them afterwards. Since this is the primary thing that's actually holding this aluminum body to the ExoSlide, you definitely want to make sure it's nice and tight, but you don't also want to strip the screws in case you ever have to take it off for whatever reasoning. So as you can see here, with just about every screw in this install, I hand tighten it nice and tight, but that's about it. You do not need to put your whole arm into it. Now that we've got that, we're going to grab our stepper motor, and again, I'm using the one that I purchased with the flat post. And we're going to install this into the aluminum main body using the 3 included motor screws. These are the M3 by 6mm motor screws. The only thing you need to make sure is that the motor's plug is facing upright. And then we're going to install the screws into the top right, top left, and bottom left. And just like I just said a second ago, and I'm fine with sounding like a broken record because I want to make sure you don't strip any screws, just kind of loosely tighten all 3 of them in. And then once those are all tightened in, again, you want that nice and snug, so just hand tighten those 3 as well. Once done with that, it's time to install the new extruder lever, so you'll need to grab the aluminum lever, as well as the shoulder pin, and then just go ahead and push the shoulder pin through the extruder lever. It should only fit really in one direction. And then make sure you've got the gear facing inward, and go ahead and tighten that all the way in as well. After that, it's time to install the new hardened steel extruder gear. The only thing to make sure is that you install the grub screw facing inward, and you also want the grub screw to be aligned with the flat side or the flat portion of the post on the stepper motor. Then I just went ahead and did my best to eyeball it and make sure that the gears were lined up with each other. Before grabbing a piece of filament, I went ahead and just cut off a little strand of PLA, which you'll then feed from the top between the two extruders and then out the bottom. Then just take the lever and tighten it up against the gear, and basically you're going to pull the filament back and forth, and your goal here is to line up those two gears. Before you tighten the gear on the extruder, you want to make sure they're lined up, and by doing this with the filament back and forth, it will ensure that, and then you can go ahead and tighten the gear to the stepper motor. Next, we're going to grab the spring pin, the spring, and the tension knob for the extruder and the extruder arm. We will take the spring and push the spring pin through the spring, and then take the spring pin and push that through the top of the aluminum main body and through the tension arm of the extruder. And then on the other end, we're just going to go ahead and take that tension knob and tighten that down on the spring pin. And Microswiss recommends that the spring pin should be flush with the tension knob, at least as a starting point. So as you can see here, I kind of just make sure that they're even. Different filaments might require different tensions, but that's at least a safe starting point. Next, we are going to be grabbing our heater block as well as our heat break. The screw heads on the heater block means that it's the bottom side, so make sure that you install it on the correct side. The heat break should be threaded into the top of the heater block. And I start off by just using my hands to tighten it as much as I can before grabbing the included 7mm spanner wrench. And again, just hand tighten. You don't need to use your arm. You want it nice and tight, but you also don't want to break anything. So just hand tighten that in place before grabbing the nozzle. And we'll do the exact same thing. So on the other side of the heater block, we will use our hand to thread that in. And then that same 7mm spanner wrench to just use our hand and hand tighten that in. After that, grab the heatsink, as well as a tiny little grub screw, which is included with your kit. And we're going to go ahead and lay the heatsink down. The chamfered or fillet side of the heatsink should be upright, and you can just slide the heater block directly into the heatsink. And then I use one hand to hold the heat block, or hold pressure between the heatsink and the heat block together, and then my other hand to take that grub screw and tighten that down. Same thing goes with this. You definitely don't want to strip this small screw, so just hand tighten it. Next, we'll grab the beveled Capricorn liner. There's going to be one side that's flat and one side that is cut at an angle, and we'll want to make sure that the flat side goes into the top of the heatsink. Once that's installed, just grab one of the red printed Bowden clips and insert that in place so that way the Capricorn tubing can't fall out. Now that we've got our Hotend assembled and ready to install, we will go ahead and grab the two M3 Hotend mounting screws that are included with this kit. And we will push the Capricorn tubing up the main body of the extruder. So it'll just go ahead and slide up towards where the gears are at. I did my best to kind of line up the chamfer to match with the gears. And then use those two screws to tighten the Hotend to the main body. Same thing goes, just hand tighten it after the fact. Now it's time to install the heater cartridge and the thermistor back into this. Just like we tried to remove them at the same time, you want to try to slide them both in at the same time. It was incredibly difficult to get on camera, but I basically inserted the heater cartridge, and as I slid that in, I did my best to make the thermistor slide into the bottom hole where it needs to be installed at. Then on the bottom, there is two screws. If you tighten those screws, that will clamp the heater block down on that heater cartridge. You can clamp down on those pretty hard actually, because the heater cartridge is not very fragile, and you want to make sure that it stays in place since that is the heating element. Then we'll grab the thermistor screw and we will install this into the top hole on the heater block, which will basically lock the thermistor in place. Now with this one, be careful. Again, you want this to be snug, but you do not want to clamp down on those delicate thermistor cables. As you can see here, I do kind of just slowly hand tighten it, but once I start feeling any resistance from that cable, the thermistor cable, I just leave it as is. Once we've got those installed, go ahead and turn on the printer, and we are going to preheat the Hotend to 220 Celsius. We're going to do this so that way the metal can expand and we can tighten everything down to make sure that it's nice and snug. be very careful. I know that you just heated it up, so you should know that, but sometimes it's easy to forget. Just the heater block is now very, very hot, so we're going to tighten the 2 screws on the bottom. We're going to grab an adjustable wrench to grip the heater block, and then use that included spanner wrench just to one more time hand tighten that nozzle and make sure that it hasn't come loose with the heater block heating up. And then lastly, we are going to just hand tighten that Grub screw again and make sure that as things have heated one more time, that it is still nice and tight, and that way we won't have any leaks when this is all said and done. Once you've gotten those tightened, go ahead and turn the hot end off and let it cool down. It took me probably 5 to 10 minutes before I felt comfortable with the temperature it reached, and then power off the printer again. Now we can install the silicone sock onto the heater block, and we can go ahead and reinstall the fan housing and the BL Touch that we had originally taken off. Again, this is why you needed to hold on to those 2 screws, the screw that goes on the top and the screw that goes in between the BL Touch and that housing are the original fan housing screws, so we will be, like I said earlier on, reusing these to tighten those in place. We are getting close, so next we're going to grab the printed bracket that came with the kit, as well as the M3 by 10mm screws and nuts, and we are going to be installing this where the old extruder used to be. So just push the 2 screws through, and then on the back side, use those 2 nuts to just go ahead and tighten this printed bracket in place. The reason why we're installing this is so that way we can use the existing filament runout sensor and the filament spool holder, and we're actually going to be able to spool the filament through this printed part, through the Bowden tube and into our hot end. So the whole purpose of it is to act as a guide for your filament to make it easy for the filament to get into the new direct drive hot end. So just tighten those in place. And then remove the red retention clip that's on here, which will allow you to then push the Bowden tube all the way in. It should push at least a centimeter or so in there, and then put that printed clip back in place, which will then lock the Bowden tube into the printed part. And then on the other end, we will feed the Bowden tube down the top of the main aluminum body. Make sure you push it all the way through, but just a little bit north of those gears, so that way it doesn't grind on the gears. And then take the metal retention clip, and there is a tiny little slit in the top of the main body where you'll push that in, and it'll do the exact same thing where basically that will lock the Bowden tube and keep it from being able to fall down into the gears or popping out. Now the extension cable we will grab, and we will plug in the old stepper motor cable into the extension cable. And the other side of that, we will plug into where the stepper motor is at now. The whole purpose of this is because the stepper motor has moved, we now need a longer cable. So the point of this is so that way it extends the stepper motor's distance. And once we've got that, it's really just time to do some cable management. On the Ender 5 Plus, they have this awesome kind of plastic cable housing. So I just fed it all the way through to make sure that it was out of the way and I didn't have to worry about the cable catching on anything or pinching anything. So yeah, I fed it all the way down, and then I used the included zip ties to just tighten everything in place and make sure that that extension cable wasn't going to pop out. In the PDF from MicroSwiss, there is a G-code file that we'll need to download and then transfer over to the micro SD card of our printer, so that way we can print it. This will actually update the E-steps because this new extruder has a different gear ratio. It needs to have its E-steps changed so that way it doesn't under extrude and extrudes the correct amount of filament. So just download the file and transfer it over to the micro SD card, browse it like you're printing it, and hit print. It'll take just a few seconds and your printer will be updated and ready to go. And then really as a final step, it's always recommended to re-level the bed just after you've changed this. Even if the nozzle has just shifted around a little bit, you don't want the nozzle to dig into your bed. So I just quickly went around and re-leveled the bed before starting a print. The only thing that I found weird was I've done quite a few of these installs, and for some reason the E-steps didn't seem to update when I ran that printed file. So I went ahead and used a terminal to kind of more manually update the E-steps. It's still really, really simple to do, and I actually made a video guide on this. So if for some reason you do use the included G-code by MicroSwiss and you run a print and it seems like it's under extruding, I would recommend checking out the video in the description, which will show you how to precisely calibrate the extruder so that way you know that it's extruding the correct amount of filament that it's supposed to be extruding. And I did run a test after updating it using a terminal, and you can see the difference in quality from the print on the left, which was before it had stuck, and the print on the right, which was after I used a terminal, and it's a night and day difference. I hope that you found this video useful and that you are now up and running with your new Micro Swiss all metal and direct drive ExoSlide combo, pretty much ready to print anything that you can throw at your printer. If you do have any questions at all, let me know in the comments down below and I will do my absolute best to answer them. And when I do install videos, I always get people asking if I can do a little bit more printing after the fact, and to you I say yes, I absolutely will. Like I mentioned earlier, I've got some projects coming up that will be using this, so be sure to stay tuned for those. On that note, don't forget to like and subscribe for more great videos. I make a video every single week, so there's always fresh content coming your way. And if you do want to support the channel furthermore, I'll go ahead and place links down below in the description over to my Patreon, where there are some pretty awesome rewards. Huge thank you to all of my current Patreon supporters. You guys are absolutely amazing, and I appreciate each and every one of you allowing me to keep coming back and spend more time doing what I love, which is making content for all of you guys to enjoy. On that note, this has been Deanna from ModBot. I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video, and I'm out. Peace, guys.